Hey, everybody, welcome back. I've got Whitney Reese with us again today, and we got a really interesting topic that we kind of just want to go back and forth on a little bit. And it's really a longer term perception of progress. And so, what I wanted to ask Whitney was how does she and how do a lot of her clients and potentially other athletes that she's worked with, how do they perceive either progressing or not in a very long term way? So, let me kind of ask you sort of a primer question, but Whitney, how would you actually determine long-term progress towards a goal? Like, what does it mean to progress, in your opinion?
Um, I think some of that depends on the type of goal itself. So for sport, goals that are skill based, they're a bit more of a journey. So what I mean for that is an example would be learning to do a rainbow with a soccer ball. Is you just do it again and again and again and again. And there's a point in time you're like, oh, I did it. And either you then decide, okay, now that I did it once, I want to add that skill into something else, or I achieved my thing that I was working on and now I just want to learn something new. I have found person to person that some of that is personality. There's some people that once they complete a task, they may not be interested in then taking that task into something else. So on the coaching side, I'll be honest, those are the clients I actually really like working with, because there's a more dynamic approach. There's a bit more of back and forth on, okay, now that you've achieved whatever that goal was, what do you want to do with it? The people that say, I was really just doing it because I wanted to see if I could do it. The thing I want to try to do now is something totally different. Those people tend to just have this really long journey for just experimenting and enjoying being able to express themselves. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're always competitive. When they are competitive, they're competitive in a thing until they're successful at it, and then they're competitive in a different thing until they're successful at that thing. I was that way as a child, right? It was like, ooh, I've mastered this. Okay, done, bored with it. Now I want to master something else. It's a very different long-term journey. Opposite end of the spectrum is the person that has a specific thing they're trying to improve. Think of it as, an example would be putting a certain amount of weight on a back squat. And okay, once you pick a number, let's say the goal is 300 pounds. And then the journey to get to a specific number of 300 pounds. For some people, understanding that success is more like a tree line on a mountain. It is not a straight climb uphill. When the goal is very number based and it's not attached to something else, the ebbs and flows can be more frustrating, because there's that point of time of, let's say we tried a certain type of squat cycle, which is a whole other conversation of like percentage and numbers don't really work the way that we think they do. But let's say that we did that. And then at the end of that cycle, we retest the back squat, and we anticipated to put 30 pounds on and we only put on 10. So that's kind of that's the ebb part. Does that mean everything in the design was wrong? Maybe not. It could have been life was different, stress was different, sleep was different. Maybe retesting and maximal contraction was just on a day that they were like, I'm not really feeling it. And so there's that drop down. Well, if the drop down results in abandoning the goal, then that means we probably didn't really talk about what success looks like as far as a journey of an athlete. And just visualizing a mountain that has a tree line on it tends to make sense for more people, that there's these up and down phases, but slowly you should still see a progression towards whatever your goal is.
If the person is somebody that likes to do something really well and then switch to something else and get good at that. And what would you define as success for them? Just the sheer act of testing these things out and getting better, or what?
I think some of it is digging into why in those people. I've found that tends to be later in the kind of progression of what it means to be an athlete, is as you get towards the phase of mastery and longevity, that the need to express yourself physically might be within the essence of that person. And so being able to express themselves might change over the passage of time with aging. So when they were in high school, it might have been competing in a contact sport. And then going through college, it might have been going to a regular gym and weightlifting. And then getting married and having kids, it might be, I want to be able to do sport things with my kids, which I now haven't done in a decade. So now I'm back on this journey of being able to do these things with my kids and have fun. Then my kids finish school, they're out of the house. Well, now I get to focus on me again. So now I need to find, what is it that I want to do? Is it hiking? Is it swimming? Is it rock climbing? Like there's this journey of expressing yourself that changes over time. I've just found aligning why is usually what keeps the fulfillment there for being able to obtain progress over time, and being able to say at this point in time, could you do these things to obtain what you're defining as success as being? If it's a number on a bar, are you going to do all the things to get to that point? If it's being able to hike a certain distance, are you going to do all the things that it takes to get to that point, and being able to lay out that journey?
So I'm thinking about now the flip side, the person who truly wants to master something and is willing to go the distance. Quick question: would you say that? And I'm prefacing this because I'm thinking of the movie The Last Samurai. How Katsumoto talks about how it's like it's a lifetime of dedicated practice, essentially, at the end of the day, to mastering something. And I think that a lot of people term things mastery today, but how would you term mastery is kind of the first question. And then for that group of people who truly want to master something, how do you help them understand those ups and downs within the tree line that you're talking about better to stay focused?
Oh, that's a big question. Okay. Mastery, oh, that takes a lifetime. So the way that I look at mastery is there's stages of competency within mastery. And one of them is being unconscious and completely incompetent. Like you don't know what you don't know. You're not aware of it, but you are muddying your ways through the water with this goal in mind. That's kind of the novice starting point. And then you get to this phase of you're now conscious to how incompetent you are. Like you're aware of it and you know that there's something you need to do to get to that mastery stage. And then once you become conscious of it, then you start working on your actual competency. And that's the stage where sometimes the goals start to diverge, because maybe it's a skill if it's someone doing something not athletic, for example. If they're doing a contact sport, and let's use soccer as an example again, and they're now aware that they aren't competent with a certain long ball. Well, that might be the only thing they focus on until they're competent at it. Well, the next stage, once they develop competency, is they're conscious of it. So they now can flip back and forth between knowing where they're competent and where they're incompetent. And that's kind of that longevity stage. And then ultimate mastery is when they start the process back over again and say, okay, what am I now not competent in? And the cycle starts again. Professionally in healthcare, true mastery is what I call the guru stage. where you've now stepped out of the being involved in the process part, and now you're teaching and mentoring kind of that next generation through the stages of being incompetent and also being completely unconscious of it. That really, I see that last phase of mastery of actually stepping out and going through the mentoring process. There's a lot of learning that comes in that process of identifying your own biases and identifying areas that you also weren't conscious that you weren't competent in. Interacting more with novices brings up questions that you otherwise wouldn't have asked, and it makes you start that cycle back over again. True mastery is the essence of constantly being in that cycle and being okay with being in that cycle and just enjoying the process, and not necessarily saying I need to end it at some point, that at some point I've learned everything, there's nothing new that I need to know, there's nothing new that I need to change, I know all the things. I think getting to that stage is actually what I would call as retirement. When you're in professional occupations, that last stage, I would say that's when you're ready to just enjoy life and go have fun.
Interesting. Let's call it there for this one. There is one additional question that I'm going to ask you on our next episode, so I'm going to leave it for that. But I really appreciate it, Whitney. And as always, this is insightful, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Oof.